Special guest Eli Berkovits joins the show to discuss the NFL Combine, his visit to the Senior Bowl and some of the cool interactions he had down there, and NFL free agency.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey, yeah, ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm cash.
All right, everybody, welcome back into another episode of Sounds Gouda. I'm pretty excited for today's episode. As always, we've got my co-host and best friend over here, Rob Relf. My name is Jordan Olson. We have a special guest on the show today. A lot of you who keep up with all things Packers probably know a little bit about Eli, but we have Eli Berkovits on the show. He's a contributor on the Pack-A-Day Podcast Network. He's a writer primarily for Packer Report. But also that's on 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports, and you can catch a lot of his, fine work on Book of Eli _NFL on X. So, Eli, thanks for being on the show today.
I appreciate it. I really do. I was looking forward to, talking some Packers draft, and I know you guys are very into it, and I appreciate that. I haven't had the chance in the last, at least for sure since the Combine, but even not that much since the Senior Bowl to really talk and dive into this class a bit more specifically for the Packers. So I'm excited to do that. Appreciate you guys thinking of me.
Awesome. Yeah, before we dive in, just gonna, as always, thank any new and returning listeners. We have new episodes every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And you can connect with Rob and I on X at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's and Olson George. So Eli, let's do exactly that. Let's dive right into some draft talk here. We just finished the NFL scouting combine, but regardless of that, who are some of your favorite prospects for the Packers in this coming draft?
Yeah, so there of course, right, there are a lot of guys that I think anyone who follows the draft, you end up with a list of not 50 guys you really love, but maybe a list of 10 to 15 guys that you really, really like.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you'd be lucky to get one or two of those guys on your team. But for me this year, I'm mostly focusing, again, in terms of the Packers, on cornerback, edge, wide receiver, and then defensive tackle as more of a, not luxury, but I think a little bit lower of a need than those other positions, but still something I think they're going to focus on. So sticking with those positions to start at the edge, Donovan, Azaraku, and Nick Scourton. So Azaraku, of course, out of Boston College, Jeff Hafley connection there. Nick Scourton over at Texas A&M. Both of them really exciting players, very different players. I think Scourton is more Packersy than Azaraku. I think Azaraku would be a departure from what we've seen the Packers do along the defensive line. But I kind of want to see that. I think we have everyone on the line is so, they're more like thick, bigger bodies, brute strength kind of guys. We don't have any bendy, twitchy guys that are beating you with speed off the edge. You just don't have it. And Azaraku is that guy. Like him and James Pierce, I think, are the two guys where if the Packers wanted to really change up what their edge room looks like, you look at those two guys and you look at their ability to bend and their quick get off the line. Like Rashawn Gary maybe had that those first couple of years. Now, again, and it's not even like Rashawn Gary is a much bigger conversation, but this isn't like a anti-Rashawn Gary thing. It's more I want to see something different. I want to see something different at the edge. So Azaraku would be that. Last year, 14 sacks, 60 pressures, 42 stops, which for PFF is basically a play that it's not a tackle for loss, but it's a tackle within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage or for a loss. 42 stops. That's a huge number to put up as an edge. Again, not a defensive tackle, not a middle linebacker, an edge. That's a great number. And then Nick Scourton, who, if I'm being honest, I just talked to Azaraku, but Nick Scourton is one of my favorite overall players in this draft. I think he's getting a little bit of, he's fallen down boards a little because his last year at Texas A&M wasn't as good as his previous year over at Purdue, which is where he transferred from. But still, 78 pressures and 12 sacks over the last 2 seasons. Someone that is very disciplined in the run game, really, really good. Like, you could watch highlights of Nick Scourton and see him against the read option specifically. You cannot beat this guy at read option. It's like in the Packers, obviously we have a lot of trauma in the read option world. This guy.
Don't bring up that pain, Eli.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But no, he's very disciplined. And I think his body type is more what the Packers generally go for. So I could see Scourton being an option I don't know about 23. I personally wouldn't have an issue with it. I don't know if that's where the NFL sees him right now. But if he was around at 55, and let's say we went corner or defensive tackle in the first round, I think Scourton could be an option. And I purposely left out receiver in the first round because, like a child with Santa Claus, I'm just done. It's over. I will no longer fool myself into believing the Packers will draft a first-round receiver. It's unfortunate. It's sad. I don't agree with it. But I think for me, it was once they passed on Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Matt LaFleur repeatedly saying that they really liked him and still not drafting him, that's it. Like for me, that I've seen all I need to see to know that it's just not worth thinking about. So to jump to receiver, though, a guy I don't think we'll get in the first round, but maybe in the second, Jalen Royals, Utah State, of course, or loves alma mater. Really, really exciting player. Someone I think would fit Matt LaFleur's offense so perfectly. Like you're not going to find a better fit really for Matt LaFleur's offense. Over 1,900 yards his last 2 seasons, 21 touchdowns over the last 2 years. And again, this is Utah State, right? This isn't the SEC. They're not throwing the ball all over the field over there. So really good after the catch, electric with the ball in his hands. I think he would be a really good complement to the other receivers we currently have on the team. And then flipping back to the defensive side at corner, my 2 top guys that I think make sense for the Packers and will be there at for sure 23, maybe even 55 for one of them, or maybe both. I don't know. But Trey Amos and Azariah Thomas. Trey Amos, of course, out of Ole Miss. Thomas out of Florida State. 2 of my favorite players in this draft. We'll get more into like their specifics when we talk about the Senior Bowl because I got the chance to interview both of them. Really good guys. But Amos last year, 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, allowed a 56.4 passer rating. Really, really sticky in coverage. Just does the fundamentals right. Like I think he's just like a super secure, safe player. Like I just don't see him getting beat really badly a lot, falling on double moves, not really his thing. And then Azariah Thomas, 0 touchdowns allowed last year, 50.2 passer rating allowed. Again, sticky in coverage, definitely needs to improve a bit as a tackler. Like it's one of those things with a corner where I would rather have a corner be a willing tackler, but maybe not the best tackler out there, as opposed to a corner who's just going to like throw a shoulder in and like hope that somehow that knocks down a grown man. You know, Kevin King style. It's just not going to work. AZ Thomas, he will try, like he's going to give you his all. He might miss the tackle. Like I'll be honest, I was watching him last night against Duke from last year, and he missed a couple really tough tackles that he should have made. But he does have for a corner, I think it was like 21 stops, which was a pretty high number for a corner making that many tackles. I appreciate his physicality. He just needs to kind of work on the fundamentals a bit more. But still, if he's there at 55 and they didn't take a corner in the first, they have to take him or something went terribly wrong. Or, I mean, I don't know, maybe we signed DJ Reed and then maybe it's not an issue. But that's it for corner in terms of guys I really like. And then last name I'll throw in here, defensive tackle, Darius Alexander out of Toledo, someone who I don't think a lot of people were talking about before the Senior Bowl. And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't really know much about him before the Senior Bowl either. And then I was down there and I was like, who is this man that is gigantic and unblockable and just freakishly fast and explosive? And that's Darius Alexander. Last year, he was PFF's 7th overall graded defensive tackle, 3rd against the run. Love a good run defensive tackle, but he's also, he could rush the passer, absolutely. So that's kind of just like, if someone had, like, as you guys did, right? My favorite prospects, I know I probably threw out maybe a couple more names than you were asking for, but that was probably, just hitting all the positions that we're looking at, those are my guys.
So after the combine too, right, everybody gets through into the RAS scores, right, and everyone has an asphyxiation of what that is, and I totally get that, right? There's history and statistics of exactly the RAS scores and the numbers for what the Packers have taken, every team, right, for that matter. But what are your feelings as far as the RAS scores go overall? Do you think that people put too much stock into it? People don't put enough stock into it, and how do you balance like super athleticism with like college ready production?
Okay, so you guys are trying to get me heated up early, I see. Get the show up to a heated start, and I appreciate that. It makes it more fun, so that's good. But
we like our guests fiery on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring some of that fire. I don't know. I mean, I've brought it up on Twitter a few times over the years, but I'm not an as like I do. Yes, of course, an athletic player, great. I love a good athletic player. I'm not like against athleticism. What I'm against is we'll watch tape of a guy who looks phenomenal, who has, let's just say, an edge rusher. He has, 8+ sacks in 2 or 3 years of college, a bunch of tackles for loss, just a general disruptor. But then for some reason, he goes out at the combine and it runs a little bit slower and maybe doesn't jump so high. Because look, there's nothing more important to me than my edge rushers jumping super high. I love that because that really matters in a football game. Like, most of the game is played in the sky, so I need them to jump really high. Like, it doesn't even make sense.
If we were really good at like blocking field goals or something, we were hurdling dudes. I mean, maybe,
okay, exactly,
but we're terrible at that.
If
So
field goals
that hasn't
were worth
translated
35
yet.
points, until field goals are worth 10 points a kick, I don't care that much how high you can jump. And I get it's the explosiveness and this, that, but he showed you on film that whether he can jump high or not, or he's explosive enough or not, or athletic enough or not, he produced. He went out there and actually got production. And when you just say, you know what, that's not good enough, but this guy on one morning in Indianapolis ran really fast and jumped really far and had super long arms, that's it. Who cares if he had 2 sacks a year in college? Who cares if he was a cornerback who got burnt all the time? He's got long arms. You don't need to be good. As long as you have long arms, you're fine. It's insane. Like, you can use RAS and you can use, and everyone, I've gotten attacked by other Packer people. They don't use RAS. They have their own model. Okay, well, whatever their own model is, it seems to be pretty damn close to RAS because every player with a lower than 8 RAS doesn't get drafted, essentially, 90% of the time, whatever it is. So I don't care they don't use exactly RAS. They use something very similar, clearly, and I think they just value it too much. Like, of course, yes, sometimes you're going to draft a player with great college production, and he'll still be a bust. It happens, right? Of course, but I would rather take a shot on a guy who's shown me it as opposed to a guy we're saying, he's got a lot of potential, maybe he'll get there. Like, do that maybe if you're like the Raiders and you're not competing for the next couple of years, you want some high upside guys. For the last decade, we've been in Super Bowl windows drafting like a team in the middle of a rebuild. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, the guy that comes to my mind right there recently is Brian Branch, and it's like I gave up on him 2 years ago when I shouldn't have, just because his RAS was like 6.78. He ran a little slow, and I'm like, all right, the Goody's just not going to draft him. So I kind of gave up on him, but then the Lions walked into him in the second round, and it's like the tape just showed. I mean, that's a guy who can just play football, and I think that's a great example. I mean, Carl Brooks on our own team, I know that Goody goes out of his preferences a little bit more once we kind of get to the 4th or 5th round. He's willing to take some flyers, but that's just another guy who was a technician who showed time and time throughout college that he's got a bag full of tricks and he knows how to get a pass rush on.
So then I guess this takes me to this point for when you brought this up, but like, okay, Shamar Stewart, right? Like a 10, 11, 10, RAS score, right? But like, to me, like the production just does not meet it, right? So like I'm looking at someone more of like a Mike Green, right? Your Senior Bowl stud, one of them over there, right?
Yeah.
But obviously plays at a smaller school, but the man is just fast, twitchy off the edge. He just brings us a different element that the Packers, like you've alluded to in the beginning, just don't have. So like, and I get it too, like, like Danielle Hunter, right? Like Danielle Hunter didn't have a great, or didn't have the best college production, but then ended up coming in. So it's always like, well, that's the evaluation, right? But do you really think, as far as like the defense and the edge specifically goes, like a Mike Green, or I don't think James Pierce Jr. will probably make it up to 23. I don't think he tested very well at the combine. Would be a good fit here in Jeff Lee's 4-3.
Yeah, it's Pierce. I like Pierce in the same vein as Azaraku, just in terms of the fact that I think he brings something different to the team. But I don't see us drafting him because I think he's even lighter than Azaraku, and I just think he also some of the off the field stuff, knowing the Packers, they might not love that. But in terms of Mike Green, I think he unfortunately tested himself out of making it to 23. But every year, right, we always say he's never going to make it, but you can only draft 22 players before 23. So there are going to be players that fall that we don't think will fall. And I'll tell you, and a lot of mock drafts have Mike Green falling past us. I've seen many times him end up with like the Lions or the Ravens after us. If Mike Green's on the board and we don't draft him, I don't know what we're doing. Like, I get it. It's Marshall. Maybe you're a little concerned about the competition, but he had 17 sacks last year and 23 tackles for loss, which is just insane. but also he played against, I want to say, it was either Ohio State or Texas, because I know it was one of the two teams there at the end. But he had, I believe, a sack or 2 sacks. I don't know why this page is not opening right now, but he showed it against some better competition as well. It wasn't always random colleges that he was doing it for. So Mike Green, like Mark Stewart, like I spoke to him, and it happens to be, I don't know, I spoke to Shamar Stewart at the Senior Bowl, and I was with a friend of mine, and he thought my question was maybe a little bit too forward, but I don't know. I just said to him straight up, I just asked him, like, what do you want to say to general managers or people who are evaluating you when it comes to the sack production? Like,
Right.
all your numbers will be great, but like whatever. And he basically said, you got to watch the film. It was what I was asked to do there, the way our defense was set up. And, it's not like I think he was lying. Like, I do think to some level, I'm sure there's some truth to that. And then, you look at Nick Scourton's stats taking a dip there as well at Texas A&M. It was kind of the way they ran their defense. They didn't ask too much of a single guy. So will I lose my mind if we draft Shamar Stewart? Probably not, because when I saw him in person, I mean, there's no doubting the guy looks like an absolute freak. Like, he could be so good. But how do you overlook 4.5 total sacks in 37 games? That's a tough thing to overlook and just say, well, he's really, really freakishly strong and athletic. Well, if he's so freakishly strong and athletic, why couldn't he get a sack against guys in college? Now he's going to come to the NFL and we're going to get 10 sacks a year out of him? Like, maybe, but I don't know how. If you're looking at him against Donovan Azaraku at 14 sacks and 42 stops last year,
Yeah.
I just don't know how you can justify it. Like, oh, because he ran a little faster and jumped a little higher. You're an edge rusher. You're not speed rushing anyone. You're trying to push people over and get past them. And 1.5 sacks a year, it doesn't get it done.
Yeah, Azaraku reminds me a lot of Chop Robinson last year, and he didn't make it to us, but I really thought that bringing a guy in like Chop Robinson that would diversify our edge rush on our pass rush would really be good. I'm concerned with Azaraku that he's going to be too light for the Packers to draft, and that's kind of been mentioned already. So he kind of is one of those guys that I already scratched off of my list of realistic targets. But I would love him in a Packers uniform to diversify that room. I think that would be a great fit. And I like Nick Scourton, by the way, too, a lot. But kind of transitioning, we've been talking a little bit about the Senior Bowl or walking around on it, but I'm curious, I know that you were down there. You've mentioned a couple guys that you've met or interacted with, but who really stood out off the field? I mean, you talked to a few of these guys. Were any of them really fun or cool to talk to, or gave you really Packers-y vibes, or what were some of those interactions like when you were at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, so met a lot of really good players, got to speak to a bunch. It's kind of a whirlwind where it's not you're not sitting down with these guys, right? It's a big conference, it's a big auditorium, whatever, and just a bunch of players walking around and everyone's trying to get in with some questions, but you get a couple minutes with them and someone that, I mean, I have other names listed. I don't know why I'm leading with him because it's kind of random and I don't think we're going to draft him. But Aeneas Eagles, the defensive tackle out of Virginia Tech, is someone I really, really like. He was someone that stood out to me on the field at the Senior Bowl a ton. And when you see him, you feel like you're basically talking to Kenny Clark. He's a short, kind of stout, compact defensive tackle, but really strong and way more explosive and twitchy than you would expect from a defensive tackle. I posted on my Twitter page a couple weeks ago, I think I was at the Senior Bowl, but he has this rep where he pulls a spin move on a guard and destroys the quarterback. You don't see defensive tackles pulling freaky fast spin moves all that often. And then just off the field talking to him, he was a really nice guy. He actually says he's modeled a lot of his game after Kenny Clark, which makes sense considering their similarities. But he was just a really cool, nice guy. But not to talk too much about Trey Amos and Azariah Thomas, but those were kind of the two guys I wanted to talk to the most, and they were both really, really nice. I mean, Trey Amos especially was just when you talk to someone and you just feel their football IQ and feel their understanding and respect and love for the game. I think Trey Amos was definitely there. I think AZ Thomas Amos has swagger. I think Thomas maybe has a little more, but I think both, they're not to the level of Jair, levels of swag. That's kind of next level. But they're
the
both
extreme.
Yeah. A couple good years in the NFL, I think they will be bringing that kind of energy. Really like them. And then I was telling this, I think I was talking to my brother that when I was leaving the Senior Bowl, but I told him if I had to bet someone said you have to bet, $10,000 right now on a player that you spoke to at the Senior Bowl to be a good player in the NFL, I think Jack, the wide receiver out of TCU, he's just such a solid dude, such a good dude. Talking to him and just seeing him on the field, like one of those guys where, I kind of said this earlier about Trey Amos, but with Jack Bash, there was like a security where when the ball was going his direction, you had no doubt he was catching the ball. It was like a vacuum. It was just so good, so solid, crisp routes. He's not ultra athletic or ultra fast, but he's just one of those guys who's going to beat you on the field, kind of like Puka Nacua. There's been some comparisons to him, but someone I just think that is going to be a stud in the NFL. And then the last one I would say would be Gray Zabel, the first offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. I mean, let's be real. Like, I personally don't think we need to, and I would maybe even go as far to say that I don't think we should draft an offensive lineman in the
So
first.
that means the Packers will.
Exactly. Yeah. And Gray Zabel would be that guy. I mean, Brian Gutekunst probably watches this guy's film and then watches what he did at the Senior Bowl. And I mean, I don't want to, keep it PG-13, but he gets excited. He is an excited
He's at half-mast watching that,
Exactly. I mean, because let's be real, like Zabel, he played tackle in college, and then he goes to the Senior Bowl and is lights out at guard and center.
Yeah.
I mean, you draft this guy, you have someone who could play all 5 spots. He could be your starting center week 1, no doubt. If you need him to fill in a guard, boom. Fill in a tackle, boom. It's bad because it's not that I don't want, so just in terms of our interview, like I kind of met up with him right as it was all ending, and they were like, it's been a long day. These guys just worked out on the field. I'm sure that they would like to just go back to their hotel and relax and not be talking to a million people. But he took the time, even after it was over, to speak with me for, I don't know, solid 5 minutes, I would say. And just to get
awesome.
Everything you see on the field is exactly what you would expect. Just super high football IQ, really good guy, clearly someone who is just a smart person, and I think will almost certainly have a really good NFL career.
So coming back to the combine, or I guess sticking with the combine, I should say, we all know that day 3 lottery picks are what can make or break your team and your draft for that specifically. Do you got any late draft flyers or people or prospects that you're taking a close look at?
Yeah, so I have a few. I would say we'll start at cornerback, Quincy Riley out of Louisville. I'm not sure if he makes his day 3. I feel like he probably will because he didn't test great.
Yeah.
He didn't test terribly, but he didn't test great. But he's just like a ball hawk. He's just one of those guys who finds his way to the football. 14 career interceptions in college. He did play a lot of ball, but still 14 picks, a lot of interceptions. 26 pass breakups. Just someone who knows how to get his hands on the football, who, we watch Eric Stokes. He hasn't got his hand on the football in almost 3 years. So I want to see cornerbacks who can make plays on the ball. He's very aggressive, physical at the line, someone that I think would be a good fit in our defense, and someone that if, let's say, the first couple rounds we go edge, defensive tackle, receiver, and you want to grab the guy in the 4th round, if we got Quincy Riley in the 4th round, that's a home run pick for me, no doubt, all day. So I would love that. I brought up Aeneas Peebles, the defensive tackle. I don't think we'll draft him because I think he's too much like Kenny Clark, where it would be like, you don't need him unless you really think Kenny's gone after maybe next year, which he could be. But Aeneas Peebles, I just really like him. It's good enough RAS where I think he would at least be on the radar. 65 pressures and 8 sacks over the last 2 years for a defensive tackle. Pretty solid numbers. I like him. A receiver, Torrey Horton out of Colorado State, 6'2", 185. He was hurt for part of last year, but in 2022 and 2023, he had over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns in both seasons, 9.40 RAS, so I think he'll definitely be on our radar, and someone that I just think could be, I'm not going to call him Christian Watson, but I'm saying whatever. We need someone who could play outside with Watson being out and the overall uncertainty of the wide receiver room, and we don't need another slot with Reed. So I think Horton could make sense on day 3. And then a quick edge rusher, Baron Sorrell out of Texas, 42 pressures, 8 sacks, and 22 stops last year, another 9+ RAS score, and someone that, to me at least, at the Senior Bowl really, really stood out. So if we got Sorrell in the 4th or 5th, I'd be pretty excited about that.
Yeah, one corner that I really like is, what's your opinion on Jacob Parrish from Kansas State as a day 3 guy?
I like him a lot. I actually think he'd probably go before day 3, but I think the issue with him is just his size. is generally not how we draft our corners. And I also think specifically because I think they like Javon Bullard in the slot, I think they're almost certainly going to look for like your stereotypical outside corner,
Yeah.
which is the only reason they wouldn't draft Jahdae Barron if he somehow was there at 23 would be because like some people think he'd be better off in the slot. I think he's certainly big enough to be an outside corner. He's not huge, but I mean, Sam
Yeah.
Shields was an outside corner for us for years, and he's like 5'9". So like Jahdae Barron, if he's there at 23, I think it's such an obvious automatic pick. So as Rob said earlier, no chance it happens. We'll draft a punter out of West Kentucky. But like, yeah, so Jacob, back to Parrish, he is someone I really, really like. I just unfortunately don't think we're going to consider him.
Yeah. Another guy that I've started to since the combine take a little bit more stock in is Dante Thornton Jr. I mean, I kind of see him as like the MVS of this draft, extremely fast runner in the 40. If we go ahead and let's just say in this world, and we're going to get into free agency in a minute, where we sign a Davante Adams and welcome him back with open arms, I'll get your stance on that. But if we just need somebody with speed late, somebody like him makes a lot of sense to me. I really like Pat Bryant. I know that he didn't run the best 40 time, but those are a couple of like 5th round wide receivers that I could see the Packers really being interested in.
So Dante Thornton was the name. It was between him and Torrey Horton. Like those are the two names I had down at receiver. Like I really like Thornton. And yeah, I think MVS is a great comp, right? I mean, the guy ran freakishly fast for his size. Last year, he averaged over 25 yards per reception, which, that's basically exactly what MVS was, right? 18 plus yards per catch like every year. So Thornton, that would be an exciting pick. Like, even if we drafted a receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round, if you could grab Thornton later, I wouldn't hate it. But for sure, if we end up just adding a veteran or, I don't see a scenario where we don't add a veteran and we also don't draft a receiver before day 3, but crazier things have happened. And if that is the scenario, like I actually think specifically a guy like Thornton would be huge to add because we need that guy. We need the guy who could take the top off the defense. We don't have it without Watson. And even back to MVS days, we saw the impact it took on the offense to not have that deep speed threat. So if Dante Thornton's the only receiver we add, like put it this way, if we only add one receiver this offseason and he's not a veteran and he's not a top 50 player, I want it to be someone who's just fast as hell. Because I'm not going to expect you to catch the ball all that often. But you need to be someone that defenses have to respect deep more than anything else.
Yeah, great points. I mean, we skip maybe we go in on corner and free agency and some other spots and, like Trey Harris in the 3rd round and a Dante Thornton Jr. in the 5th round would be the perfect way to address that. All right, Eli. Yeah. So, kind of coming out of the draft and into free agency, obviously this coming Monday, just a few days from now, we're going to be jumping into free agent frenzy. But, just in your opinion, what available player, that could be free agency this coming week or any of the names that we've thrown around in trades, which player for you would improve this Packers team the most this offseason? What guy are you really banging the drum for?
So I've been kind of all over with this. I'll be honest, when I was at the Senior Bowl, I was told some things by some people that led me to believe that Max Crosby really could have had a chance to be a Like, and of course, today he signs the extension, so that dream is dead. But, like, I mean, Brian Gutekunst spent most of his time at the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl with Raiders executives and front office people, and I was told that Max Crosby was discussed a lot. But, of course, that didn't happen. That would have been the guy I went with had he not signed today. But I'm still going to stick at the same position, and I'm going to go with Josh Sweat from the Eagles. And I think in the end, this is probably a better move regardless. So you could talk Crosby, you could talk Myles Garrett, but you would have to give up so much and then pay them so much where why not just sign Josh Sweat? Like, yes, he's going to get a big contract, but you're not giving up 1st round picks to do that. And he's a great player. Like, no, he's not Myles Garrett. He's not Max Crosby, but 8 sacks last year, 54 pressures, 27 stops as an edge rusher. Of course, we saw how dominant he was in the Super Bowl, the playoffs in general. And again, like Azaraku, like James Pierce, just a different edge rusher than we have. A skinnier, longer, bendier kind of guy, twitchier kind of guy that would be a great complement to Rashawn Gary. And also, take a lot of the pressure off for Sean Gary, where no more, he's not going to get double teamed every single snap now if you have a guy like Josh Sweat on the other side. I mean, you have Sweat and Gary consistently coming from both sides. That's a problem for any offense. So Josh Sweat, we have a ton of money, and I don't care. Like, I'm a big believer in that the cap is not real. I don't care. You want to tell me it's real? I'll let future Eli deal with the cap, because right now, like, you want to win. Like the Saints, right? The Saints right now, they're in the worst cap situation ever, and it's so terrible, and it is terrible. But you know what? I was hearing about the Saints cap situation like 12 years ago. The Saints cap for a decade. And okay, you know what? Yes, eventually you got to pay the piper. But when you're a team who's trying to compete for Super Bowls, do whatever you have to do. And you know what? If a couple years down the line, you can sign some free agents and you have to cut some players you don't want to cut, okay, we've done that anyway. Like, we don't sign players most years anyway. We cut a lot of our favorite players anyway. Like, go and spend money and try to win a Super Bowl. I just think, I know it gets easy to look at the Eagles and maybe even look at the Rams and like teams that are so all in every year. And you know what? There are years it blows up in their face, and the trades they make fail, and the draft picks don't work out, and the contracts don't work out. But I don't think the Rams would complain about, they won a Super Bowl with Stafford, and maybe when Stafford leaves, they have a couple years of being really bad. I don't think they're going to complain about it. The Eagles, if when all this is over and, A.J. Brown's gone and Saquon's gone and they have all this dead money and whatever, are they going to complain after winning a Super Bowl? I don't think so. So win me a Super Bowl and I'll worry about contracts later.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I maybe you can settle this debate for us. I know obviously Davante just got cut, and he's going to be available now. But do you think that Davante or Chris Godwin improves this Packers team more as a free agent signing?
If Chris Godwin is healthy.
If Chris Godwin's healthy, to me, those are the only two free agent wide receivers that I'm truthfully interested in. But what's your take on those guys or any other wide receivers that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, I've made it very clear on Twitter that I would love to see Davante back on the Packers, and it's not just like, oh, bring him back, right? Like they did with Cobb or Trevon, where it's like a nice little story, and maybe he'll contribute a bit. Like Davante Adams had a good year last year. When he missed part of the season, he switched teams in the middle of the year, learned a new offense in the middle of the year. So, Davante, no doubt, bring him back. He'll immediately know the offense. And is he going to be the guy that he was 4 years ago? No, but we don't need him to be that guy. Even if he went out there and had 800 to 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, which for him would be one of the worst years of his career, would be infinitely better than what we've got the last 2 years from our receivers. So Davante Godwin, I love Chris Godwin. He's actually been one of my favorite non-Packers in the NFL for a long time. I wouldn't complain if we signed him. I would not love to sign him to a huge deal coming off an injury, but if he wanted to sign like a 1 or 2 year prove it kind of situation, I'm all for that. But the reason why I went with an edge rusher is I just think, I don't know if there's anything to me that's more important than just putting pressure on the quarterback consistently. If you're a team that can consistently pressure the quarterback with a 4-man rush, you're going to win games. Like, you're going to beat teams you shouldn't be able to beat. You're going to slow down offenses. Your secondary shouldn't be able to slow down. Like, that's why for me, no corner is going to be more important to me than a good edge rusher, because edge rusher makes the corner's job a lot easier, not the other way around. So give me the edge rusher, and then I'll worry about corner.
Great points.
Well, as we're nearing towards the end here, Eli, you got anything special that you're working on as far as this offseason goes, and where can people find your stuff, listen to you, and find your work at?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have anything specifically planned just yet. I do hope to be doing some more live streams. I'll maybe get some guests to come talk the draft as we lead up to that. And then I'm hoping to get a weekly show up and running again sometime around maybe before the draft. Might be a little bit close before the draft, but for sure before the start of next season, which I'll of course keep you updated all on over on Twitter at @bookofeli_NFL. You can find all my work there, but my writing over at packreport.com. So that's where you will find most of my stuff. Just head over to my Twitter and you'll find it all.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you coming on too, and hopefully we can get you coming back here again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. I do appreciate it, guys. And yeah, we should definitely do this again.
Once again, thank you to Eli Berkovits for coming on and joining us. As always, really good to get some other Packers experts' thoughts out there as far as the draft and the combine, specific thoughts on RAS scores and whatnot too. So just generally appreciate him coming on and collaborating with us. And we hope that you all liked it as well. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below. But yeah, Packers fans, just know that we do have more content every Wednesday and Saturday. YouTube's Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us below on the banner at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's and Jordan at Olsen Jordan. But we hope you appreciated this interview today, and we hope that you have a Gouda morning, Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Take care. Go Pack Go.
Been wanted this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up.